Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. Apologies for the late start. Dr. Kapasa just had some technical difficulties, but he said he's working on them just now. But we'll begin as soon as possible. In the meantime, we can start with an introduction of who we are as ACT in Africa. Again, thank you very much for making time. Please just show by hand or unmuting yourself if you can hear me. Great. Thank you very much. So today what we want to talk about is the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, the opportunities it presents for SMEs, entrepreneurs, and the young people, which we call youth. But before we get to that, we just wanted to talk about who we are as Action Africa. For some of you, this might be the first time that you hear of us, but essentially we exist to drive job creation and entrepreneurship through the practice of human-centered design. And I'll explain a bit later what human-centered design means. Sorry. Sorry about that. There we go. It seems I was having technical difficulties myself. So who are we? ACT is a nonprofit that focuses on creating gender-balanced employment. And this is driven through the practice of human-centered design, which we do either through the human-centered design training or the business growth program, which we'll talk about later. And during the business growth program, our aim is to support businesses through business skills training. This also includes financial literacy, mentorship, and also research support that we provide using the same methodology of human-centered design. And basically, human-centered design is a process that involves talking to your target audience or your target market, understanding their problems or the concerns that they might have, observing them as they're experiencing the problem or the problem statement that they might have. Then based on that, we then redefine or define the problem that they're actually facing. And based on that idea, or based on the problem that we then identified through the observation or understanding of the problem, we ideate and come up with different ideas which we can possibly solve the problems that they may be facing. And from there, from these ideas, we prototype them so that the target audience can actually interact with them and give us feedback based on the ideas that we would have came up with. And please note that the prototype will be very, very minimalistic. I'll show you a picture of one in the next few slides. Then through the prototype, we test it with the target audience, as mentioned, as many times as possible in order to get the correct feedback, or in order to solve the problem as much as possible for the target audience. Then we involve the launching step where we actually then go full throttle with the idea that we would have came up with. So our programs are basically designed in 3 steps, or rather they have 3 characteristics that they mainly run by. They are built on best practices, and these are taken from tools and methods that we understand or get to find out from local and regional markets, and we reintroduce them into underinvested markets like Zimbabwe. We also incorporate human-centered design methods, as mentioned, the one that we just talked about in the previous slide. And we also include an iterative and continuous programmatic design, where we always try and listen to the market and find out what the market is requiring from us, the market being the young people, the SMEs, and the entrepreneurs. And as mentioned, we have three major programs that we run. One of them is a human-centered design research program, training program. And sorry, just a second. Good evening. Thank you. Thank you. I was just checking someone was having a problem with trying to join. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Okay, so for those who just joined us, we're just going to talk a bit about ACT in Africa while we wait for Dr. Kapasa. This is just an introduction of who we are so that you understand who you're talking to. As mentioned to the other guys, Dr. Kapasa had a technical difficulty, which he's trying to attend to right now. So if I may proceed. So the first program, we call it the Human-Centered Design Research Training Program. And it's targeted at youth between the ages of 18 to 45 years of age. And the program lasts for 4 weeks, which are divided into 2 weeks of theoretical learning, or rather deep dive into HCD, then another 2 weeks of a corporate hack where we place them within corporate challenges of corporate partners that we'll be working with to actually implement and practice the ideas that would have taught them in the 2 weeks prior. So as you notice, these are some of the things that we'll be doing during the research period. They'll be talking to target audience people based on the identified problem, and later they would present the solutions that they would have came up with to the corporates or to the client that we'll be dealing with. So you notice I mentioned earlier that the prototypes that we build are very minimalistic, and you will see the pictures shown are prototypes of a shopping experience that we prototyped in order to then talk to the target audience that basically will be implicated by the challenge that will be stated. So you will see that our researchers, they are actually talking to a target audience member who is then giving us the valid feedback that we need to then incorporate within our design. And I would like to just mention a disclaimer. Please note some of the pictures here are from pre-COVID areas. So you'll find some pictures have masks on and others do not have, because those are pictures from previous years when we were doing those programs. For instance, a picture like that one. So the second program that we have is the business growth program. Here we target operating businesses. By operating, we mean a business that has been running for at least a year and is starting to generate profit or revenue. The idea behind this is that we want to grow what would you like to call an entrepreneur into an actual functioning business or enterprise that operates on its own. And during the business growth program, we take them through 6 boot camps, one of which is in partnership with BDO, the accounting firm, where we teach them financial literacy and also have their management accounts managed by BDO. And also within this business growth program, our entrepreneurs get to receive 8 weeks of research using the same concept that we mentioned earlier, which is human-centered design. So you will see this is just a landscape of what happens during the business growth program from the first month to the 6th month. It's a 6-month program that we have, which is the longest. Then lastly, we have the Academy for Women Entrepreneurs, which is a partnership with the US Embassy of Harare, or rather of Zimbabwe, where we train a target of 100 women in each class. So far, we've had 2 classes, one in 2019, another in 2020, and the 2020 graduation we actually just held last week. You will, for this year, we're looking at targeting 2 classes, which means this year we're looking to target 200 women to train during this program. It is a 7-week program where the idea is to emancipate and empower the women with business skills, training, and also mentorship through partnerships with other established businesses or organizations. So that's it about us. actinafrica.com, that's our website. If you want to contact us via WhatsApp, that's our number. And you can always find us on social media as well. For those that are watching from Facebook, you're already in access of our Facebook platform. Let me just check on Dr. Kapasa's status. But while we wait, okay. He just said, okay. Mr. Mutambanengwe, may you please just introduce yourselves to the audience, who you are, what you do, and who you represent.
Hi, good evening. Just confirm you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, my name is Farai Mutambanengwe. I'm the Executive Officer for the SME Association of Zimbabwe. So the SME Association of Zimbabwe it's an association that works with startups, small and medium enterprises, and we help them hopefully to grow into large corporations in a nutshell. So basically that's who I am.
Okay, thank you. What and who qualifies to be part of the SME Association?
It's practically everyone who is in business. Particularly, we focus on what we call the growth-oriented enterprises. So by growth-oriented enterprises, we are saying someone who's into business and whose intention is to grow that business, to see it grow. If I'm starting up, my intention is eventually to be running a large business. So we help in terms of providing the sort of skills.
Great, thank you very much. We're still waiting for Dr. Kapasa. He just sent me a message just now saying he's joining in the next 5 minutes. Again, apologies for the delay. Okay, so this is what we could possibly do. Based on your understanding, I'll back to you, Mr. Mutambanengwe. How do you think the agreement which we are talking about today, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, is going to benefit the SME enterprise, or rather the SME sector, based on what you know right now?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Mr. Mutambanengwe, can you hear us? You are on mute.
I can hear you now.
Yeah, great. I was asking, based on what you know right now, how do you think the SME sector can possibly benefit from the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement?
It's a bit of a challenge at the moment because if we look at where we are as a country and what we've just come through, a very protracted period of lockdowns because of COVID. So what you find is that the AfCFTA became operational or became live starting the 1st of January. But if you look at us as Zimbabwe, we've not really kicked that off. Why? Because we've not been prepared both from a large corporate point of view, but also from an SME point of view. A lot of our SMEs are still trying to put together, if I can put it that way, put together the nuts and bolts of their business, trying to get it right in terms of how do I actually run a business without, before we even start talking about how do I go into the region. So I would say there's still quite a bit of work that needs to be done. Obviously, we still need the economy to stabilize and pick up, because you cannot compete from a weak point of view. If you're already weak as an economy, it's very difficult for you to then compete in platforms like regional markets. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in order for us to get to a point where we can say we are ready for the region. You first have to be ready for the home market, as it were, before you can even start talking about being ready for the regional markets.
That is very true. That is very true. But one might argue that there will never be a right time to dive into such things. There will never be the right economy, as it were. And I would like to believe it's not just the Zimbabwean fault that we're caught unaware, but a lot of countries are actually caught unaware by this launch. And most actually say, yes, it might have been launched, but is it operational as yet? But if who would you say is best fit to capacitate our SMEs or entrepreneurs to then grow their business, or to be at a level of efficiency where they can actually capitalize from this agreement?
Well, I suppose the responsibility is in many places. It obviously starts off with the entrepreneur themselves. Obviously, you are primarily responsible for what your business becomes. But then also there are other factors that also come into play. People like ourselves, even as associations, we have a part to play in terms of empowering our members or empowering our SMEs to be able to participate. We move it further up at national level. Again, there's a part to play by government, ensuring that we've got the right conditions or the right policies or climate to enable growth. So it's multifaceted, and even the regional bodies. You know, we've still got the regional bodies like your SADCs, your COMESAs, and so on. Besides the African Union, which is basically the mother body for the AfCFTA. So all of these levels or layers have a part to play, and it will only be through coordinated effort across the entire spectrum that will actually start to get a result out of this AfCFTA.
Yeah. Thank you very much. If you see my eyes moving around, I'm just checking on Facebook for questions. So please don't be alarmed. Thank you. And there's the idea of if the market then opens up, what happens to the market I was already enjoying? Like, say I was selling bananas in Harare and I'm the one who has that market. So when the market opens up through the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, it means people from Botswana, people from South Africa can then come with their own bananas and sell in Harare. So what do you think would be the best way for me and my bananas to survive and thrive in Harare, regardless of the other players that have just joined into the market?
Yeah, that's a quite a loaded question, if I can put it that way. I think when you look at what AfCFTA, I tend to, or I want to look at it from a sort of higher level point of view in terms of what the AfCFTA is trying to achieve. So if you look at the objective, if you look at other continents or the big countries, if you look at China, for example, China is a huge market by sheer size and sheer numbers of the population. The same applies to countries like India. Because they are so big, they've already got markets or self-contained markets. You look at Europe, the European Union, the whole idea or why they decided to come and become a union was because they wanted to create bigger markets. The same with the Americas. If you look at the Americas, again, they are big markets because they've consolidated a number of states within the setup. So this is the problem that we have been facing in Africa, in the sense that we are small countries and therefore small markets. If you look at Zimbabwe, for example, we only have 15 million people, whereas the whole of Africa is over 1 billion or close to 1 billion people. Now, the idea is to say, let's create bigger markets. And when we create bigger markets, we've got, you've then got the capacity. If you look at what they call an SME in America, it's nothing, here in Zimbabwe, we'll be calling that a large company. Because of the fact that the markets are so huge, the mindset is different. Unfortunately, in Zimbabwe, we are like, at best, we get big fish in a small pond. We are a small pond as a country because, like I said, 40 million compared to 1 billion. Obviously, that shows us just how tiny we are. Now, if AfCFTA starts to work as it should be, what it means, number one, is that there are more markets. But like you are saying, sort of now coming into your question, most of us tend to think in terms of the immediate impact and say, okay, if I had a monopoly because no one else could come into my market and I was able to supply and I was doing well, and then all of a sudden the gates are open, what does that mean for me? And we can see it as a threat, but I would like to see it as an opportunity, or I would like to encourage people to see it as an opportunity. We also look at, from an association point of view, we also try and say, fix your business, get your business to work, work towards world-class standards. You can't work towards a Zim standard. Whatever products or services you're providing, they have to be world-class. Not even regional class or Africa class, but world-class. That way, you are never threatened by anyone. And it's not difficult to achieve that. And this is the main point, that quality is not something for the big guys. Quality can be achieved even by a one-man business or a one-woman business. So this is, to me, this is the mindset shift that we need to have, or that we need to adopt, to view ourselves as being globally competitive. View yourself as a business that can be in New York and still be competitive. Because remember, even in New York, there are some people running very small businesses, but they survive in those markets. Why? Because the mindset is always geared towards quality. So this is this is the paradigm shift. I think we mustn't look at the threat, but rather look at the opportunity and say, if I produce a quality product, I'll have markets across the continent. I'll have 1 billion people waiting to buy my product. And, I think of businesses, especially like our arts. If you look at our arts sector, remember, it's not just about physical products. It's also even intangible products. It's services as well. I think of our artists, and I've always said, we've got some artists that are world-class. Some of the music that our guys have produced in the past, those guys were world-class. But because Africa was because of this silo mentality, your music is only heard in Zimbabwe. And if you look at Africa, the big musicians are coming out of either South Africa or Nigeria. Why? Because those are big countries. So I think this is what we need to see. We need to see the possibilities that arise out of this new setup.
Yeah, indeed. Think efficiency, think quality products or services, and also think international, because the market is not just Zimbabwe. You need to widen your scope, and it's unfortunate that, or rather fortunate that, we can't meet physically. But the idea of then researching into other markets of what they're doing, like in America, like you mentioned, what they're doing in Asia, that way you can have a certain standard of what your product should look like should the market open up. Now, a lot of people then say the problem is that we do not have the finances to run efficiently. So we'd have to cut corners and produce substandard products that just meet the market. What do you think about that? People complaining about money, like the money. Some say money is the answer to the problems that we have.
I tend to disagree. Um, Quality is not about money. Quality, like I said, is a mindset. I've seen, if you look at, let me give an example of the hospitality industry. I've seen people with a lot of money who set up businesses in that industry, but they just don't have that quality or that touch which is required. And I've also seen very simple setups. You can see clearly these are very low cost setups, but the way it's done, it's so good that you don't even, like for example, we have a cafe near to where we are, and they make their furniture out of the wooden pallets, those
Yeah,
things that are
yeah,
used.
yeah.
But it looks so tactful, it looks so classy that you don't look at it and think this is poor quality because it's a wooden pallet. It's done up so nicely that it actually attains quality, even though it's a low cost material. So quality is not really, it's not about money. It's about mindset. It's about to a large extent, it's also about skills and so on. So you find that quality, it just shows by itself. You don't need, something does not need to be expensive for it to be of high quality.
That indeed is true. So I don't know if you provide this already through your association, like the idea of collaborations, because one might say we both sell coffee, like you said, but we need a condenser or whatever, but we don't have one, but you do. Is that something that you provide within your association where people within the same industry can then collaborate so that they make a greater impact or be more export ready?
Yes, that's something we are trying to work towards. I think, unfortunately, what we've seen so far is that we tend to be very individualistic in our approach to business. Each person wants to do their own thing. People are very cautious about sharing. People are very cautious about partnering and so on. Even where it's actually of advantage, like the situation you mentioned. I have a piece of equipment, you have another piece of equipment, and we both need both pieces. Why can't we collaborate? So we've seen it happening. We've seen some hubs which have been set up, and people only tend to cooperate under someone when someone puts them together, and especially provides a common facility. But it's kind of not in us, and I think it's a problem for us. It's a I don't know. I don't think it's cultural, but I think it's probably, I don't know. It's probably, if we go back to our education system, our education system tends to promote individualism. Ningi is number one, Ningi is number two, and number three. So everyone's fighting to be number one. We don't tend to want to collaborate. So that also sort of comes through when we actually go into the business world. We tend to see people wanting to work by themselves, people wanting to do well individually, as opposed to looking at how do we come together, how do we synergize so that we are able to achieve objectives such as tackling bigger markets, like you mentioned. So it's still a work in progress, I would say.
That makes sense. Because I think there's an idea or rather mentality like you were sharing of limited resources. And yet, if we think in such a manner, teamwork or collaboration will never will happen. Because people will think if then this person comes in, means that's less for me. But for most part, it's not. And we also try and encourage people to unite and collaborate, especially when it comes to export opportunities. You find for example, through farming, one might have a hectare or 1 ton of um, exportable sweet potatoes, since everyone is talking about it. But the export market, or rather the market says, we want people to supply at least 5 tons, but you only have 1 ton. Your neighbor has another 2 tons. But you do not think of the idea like, let me go talk to my neighbors and we come up with this 5 tons so that we can export these and get the value that we actually invested into these sweet potatoes that we farmed. So it's a challenge, but I think it needs a workable example that people can actually embrace so that they can see that it works. But until then, it's probably going to be a theory that we just talk about in Zimbabwe. I don't know if other countries actually face the same.
Well, sometimes you kind of have to approach it differently. Sometimes people are not going to come together on their own, and a lot of the times, the sort of models that work in other economies are typically what we call things like hub and spoke models, where you have one, for example, you can have one big producer who's an exporter, who's already there, and then they have outgrower schemes with all these other smaller producers, so that big producer becomes a hub, so to speak, for all of these other smaller players. So probably you'll find that we are more likely to evolve along those lines, as opposed to us actually deciding on our own to say, let's come together, let's set up something. Maybe it's something that's going to come further down the line once people sort of get used to the idea of working together. It does produce it does have its own challenges, because again, getting uniformity, that's the other thing. Getting uniformity amongst different people sometimes is difficult, especially if you don't have one particular big brother, if I can put it like that, enforcing the standard. If you have 10 people of the same size, chances are some will try to cut corners, and then they kind of question. If someone says, no, let's meet this standard, they'll say, hey, hang on, we're all the same here. So my product should go in just like yours, things like that. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a journey, but we have to start somewhere.
All right, agreed. So speaking of the idea of getting into the export market, as the agreement is somewhat encouraging people to do, intra-African market, that is. The AfriXim, sorry, I always get that word name incorrectly, but the African Export-Import Bank has pledged 40 billion US dollars towards the inter-African trade and investment financing for the next 5 years only. So what do you think an SME owner, entrepreneur should do in order to be bankable, or rather to prepare themselves in order to be shortlisted for financing that goes into intra-African trade?
Well, the first thing and the most important thing is actually to be organized, to have a business plan, to have a strategy, because that is where everything starts. If you don't have a plan, you don't have a strategy, it's going to be very difficult for your business to actually grow, or for your business to actually become something that can compete at those levels, because it's not something that happens naturally, if I can put it that way. You don't just find yourself producing the right quality. It's actually as a result of deliberate action, and deliberate action is the result of planning. So it's important to plan. It's important to understand the requirements, especially when you look at external markets. You need to understand the requirements for those markets, and then you need to, because a lot of the times, a lot of entrepreneurs or business people start by having a product, and you try to push it out into different markets. But the way you should actually look at it is to look at the markets and then see what are the requirements for that market, and how can my product suit the requirements of that market. So all of that, obviously, it takes a lot of planning. It takes a strategic approach to doing business, and I think that's the first thing that we have to do. Upskilling ourselves. We need to continuously evolve. We need to be able to work with other experts, work with people who can assist you. There's obviously people like ourselves, but there's also other people like your Zim Trades, you know, and depending on what exactly you're doing, there's probably sector specific or industry specific associations or organizations that can assist you. So you know, you have to have an open mind. You have to be open to suggestions, open to improvement, and you have to because you have to incorporate improvement as an ongoing part of your business. So I think that's the key thing, or that's the primary thing that we need to get right. And you find that you know, we always say that a good idea is always going to get funding, or is always going to attract funding. When you've got something that actually works, or something that's actually exciting, people will flock to you to give you the funding. But when you don't, you're the one who's chasing the money, and the money is running away from you.
That's very true. That's very true. It's painful but true. So yeah, get your things in order and seek the appropriate knowledge. I don't know if there's no immediate question. I actually wanted to show our participants how they can possibly get the information that they need in order to be export ready, and in order to know what the market wants, like Mr. Farai has just mentioned. Um, there is, well, thankfully to ICT, there is platforms that you can learn from, about the different markets, about how you can export, what you need to know, what you need to prepare in terms of logistics and transport and everything. So one such platform is from the International Trade Center. I am just going to share their page just now so that you guys can see as I talk about it. I hope, Mr. Farai, can you see that way? I can confirm everyone can see?
Yeah, sure, I can see it.
Yes. So it's learning.introcent.org. I'll send the link in the chat box. And if you go to the site, you can actually learn a bit. Basically, it's a SME Trade Academy run by the International Trade Center. And within the site, there's several courses in different languages too that you can take part in to know how you can possibly grow your business, consider export markets, use e-commerce, which was a big thing during the COVID lockdowns, and the idea of international transport and logistics. So one that was quite fascinating to me, and also similar to our conversation, is the idea of considering export markets. So they actually have a course which is called Considering Export Markets. And within the course, you get to learn in only 4 hours how you can navigate yourself through this whole idea of exporting to other countries or other markets, right? And it's free. I know a lot of people like that. There's also one that just recently popped up with the African Trade Agreement, African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is called the African Trade Observatory. So in essence, this is a smart tool which you could use to, which word can I use? To pinpoint where you would possibly get a market for your products, right? So it's in essence giving you all the information you need at your fingertips without going through an expert of telling you where you can possibly market your product, right? So if we say I'm exporting from Zimbabwe, and let's say for some reason I'm into tea production, right? It will then tell me which places have an untapped market, as indicated here, untapped potential of my product, right? So you find from this list, there's Kenya, there's Namibia, there's Swaziland, which some call Eswatini, there's Lesotho, there's Egypt. And you can understand the market size that they have for your product, and also the ease of trade, which is basically how easily can you export to that market from your country, right? And with that, you can also get more details on how you can possibly export and who you can talk to in order to find out how you can finalize your export or getting your products there. So those are just two sites that I thought you our participants might find interesting in terms of using. So, but there's one problem that we might face, Mr. Farai, is that of where, like someone who's not in this webinar, how would they know, or how can we get to them in order for them to know about the opportunities that the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement brings for them? Say it's an SME or an entrepreneur in Bulawayo or in Gweru or somewhere.
Yeah, well, basically it comes down to there's always different channels that people can use, and we tend to use digital channels primarily because they are probably low cost from a marketing point of view. But there's always other channels that can be used, things like radio and so on, to reach even more people, or people that are outside of you know, the traditional media channels. But I would also say when you look at a platform like WhatsApp, it's become very ubiquitous. You know, it's being found everywhere. You find someone who's herding goats in Murombezi or something. You know, they've got a smartphone and they are on WhatsApp. So sometimes it's about taking advantage of platforms like that. And it really also depends, because a lot of it is also about resources. It's about also the target markets for the various organizations. If you look at the MSME sector, it's a very huge sector. We're talking of at the last count about 2.8 million small to medium businesses. And you find that even all of us combined, we're not even covering probably 1% of that. When we look at our associations, we're not even covering 1% of that number as of now. So I think it's also about more and more people coming up and going into this space. Government has a role to play as well, because they've also got, especially if you look at our Ministry of Women Affairs, Community Development and SMEs, they've got field agents in most of the, I think at district level, down to district level. There are platforms like that that can be used. I mean, I think it's a good thing that government is now pushing on the devolution agenda, because we also need that decentralization of both services, but also even the information centers. And you find that also, you know, once we have activity going on in all the different provinces or even districts, it will be more feasible for a lot of us to then even expand our services or our service offering to the most remote places, so that you know, that sort of information can be availed, and the whole country, as it were, can literally become an export development zone.
Yeah, you mentioned the idea that you're only tapping into a minute market of the SME sector. So what would you say is the bottleneck for most SMEs or entrepreneurs into joining an association like yours, or being part of any association? That way there's a combined leverage when it comes to policies such as these, and any other opportunities that might open up for them.
Look, I think it's partly it's been a function of the economy. Our economy has not been performing very well. So you find that a lot of businesses, much as they might be trying to grow, a lot of them have actually been working backwards, or at best surviving. So they don't, some of them might do well. Um, and what you also find is, you know, we kind of have almost a culture where if I start a business and, you know, it's doing well enough for me to buy my nice car, build my house, etc. As far as I'm concerned, I'm done. And, you know, we don't think beyond that. So you will find that a lot of people do not see the value, or do not see the need for them to actually think beyond what they're doing currently. And I think, you know, So it's probably, but I think it's also an evolving kind of situation because I mean, when I look at ourselves, even as an association, we are also sort of still evolving. We're still moving out into the market. Um, so some of it is just a function of where we are, but I think you know, the trend is probably positive. I think there's more and more people, there's more and more hubs, there's more and more business development organizations and so on that are emerging, and it will be a combined effort of all those different players within the ecosystem, as it were. That's going to lead to change, and eventually we'll get to a situation, or eventually we'll get to a stage where the average business owner understands and the importance of belonging to an organization, and the importance of continuing to develop themselves, and even you know, the importance of things like this AfCFTA. If you look at other countries, you know, there's some countries where, if you look at, for example, Kenya, and even other countries like Tanzania, the entrepreneurs are emerging. You know, we used to be in the forefront when we looked at the state of development, but we've kind of fallen back, and these guys are moving ahead, and I think we kind of need to catch up. So it's gonna, you know, I think there's a lot of work that's gonna need to be put into play, so that we can fix our situation.
Okay, yeah, that's true, because only a combined effort can actually make a huge difference, especially within the ecosystem that we're in, where we're trying to say we need to go back to our heydays, and how do we go back to that? So definitely a combined effort among SMEs, associations, among hubs, among government departments, and anyone who's basically concerned about the outlook of the economy. Because they say, I remember reading some stats saying 68% of the African economy is run by SMEs. So at some point, we need to make sure that that sector is well taken care of and is, yeah, basically well taken care of. I see Dr. Kapasa has finally managed to join us. Good evening, Doc.
Hi there. Apologies. It's been quite difficult to get in here. Like, it's been a hard day. How are you doing? How are you doing there? Right there.
We're doing good.
Finally in the building. Finally. It's been such a difficult, oh my goodness, difficult time.
Yes,
but I'm loving the conversation though. This is a very deep conversation right now. Apologies. It's been so difficult to get in here.
No problem. So as to not waste any more time, possibly you can start.
Right. So the whole concept, basically, hello everyone, Farai and Henry and everybody that's here right now. The most important part that we have to realize is the concept of, as SMEs, and taking advantage of AfCFTA basically means that we have to understand the concept of what this means. Now, we must remember that I apologize, my PowerPoint basically is not working at the moment, where I'll basically be able to like show my PowerPoint to explain basically how the system works. Now, how it works basically is we have to understand that the concept has been made that the whole idea was basically to make free trade across all borders, across Africa. So that was the main idea. But let's remember, that is not possible in the years currently, because every single nation currently in Africa has a problem, and that is internal domestic problems, whether you're in Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi, Botswana, or in any country that you're in. So basically, the main concept is how do we take advantage of this concept? So the main concept of basically taking advantage of after this agreement is basically ensuring as an SME that you're in an industry that can take advantage of certain concepts that are currently available in this agreement. Now, you must remember, in this agreement, the agreement has stated that firstly, they're looking at two concepts of two countries, right? Two portions of Africa, the underdeveloped and those countries that are still developing. So you've got like the underdeveloped and developing countries, those that are still developing and those that have reached a certain crisp on their development. So basically, Zimbabwe is on the concept on the part of underdeveloping, Zambia as well. South Africa, Botswana, Nigeria on the press of developing countries. Now, basically, the whole concept is that all countries should allow free trading, which will not happen overnight. Obviously, we know that that will not happen overnight. So the question is, as SMEs, as young Africans, how do we basically take advantage of this new agreement? So the first thing we have to think of is basically, okay, how do we take advantage of this? Now remember, the informal sector is no longer the concept of the woman on the street selling groundnuts on the street. The informal sector has now become the young man who understands how to use a cell phone and can sell clothes basically using a Facebook platform. He's also in the informal sector. So we have to understand that concept. So basically, the idea is this: there's 4 sectors that this agreement will basically reach: manufacturing and agriculture. Those are the 2 main sectors that this agreement will basically reach. Now, you must remember that this agreement basically looks at like long term. What I believe is that as SMEs, we need to basically look at how do we now tap into the industries that we can take advantage of this agreement in the present term. Because obviously as young SMEs, we can't look at the long term. We're looking at the term right now. Section 3 basically states, right, that basically certain terms give SMEs, youth and women and young men a chance below the age of 40. If you look at section 4, there's certain agreements though. Creativity and so forth also play a part. So the part that we need to take advantage of is, and here's the part: the ministries in any country that we live in, whether we're in Malawi, Zimbabwe, Zambia, or Botswana, whatever country we live in, is to basically say, like, we see this agreement and we would like to take advantage of this and basically grow forward and take my business forward. So that is where we have to think carefully. I wish my PowerPoint was on, but due to data at the moment, I'm not able to show my PowerPoint. you know, in Africa, so data will be a problem at the moment. So that is one thing we have to realize. So the main aspect is this. Remember, the majority of Africa, statistics say 2.8% of Africans, we trade actually more to the West than we do within our own African countries. So if you're like living in an African country, let's say you're living in like, you're living in Botswana. When do you trade? You only trade domestically. Zimbabwe, you trade within. Zambia, we trade within. So basically, the whole continent of Africa, we only trade within Africa 2.8%, but yet we trade 5.6% externally, fighting for the dollar and the yen. The whole point of the AfCFTA agreement is to say, if Africa can trade within their continent, then obviously we become a stronger market. The problem is that the idea is good, but can it be feasible? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. So basically it's divided into 2 parts. So we have basically 2 parts. We have basically the underdeveloped nations and the developed nations of Africa that will be able to take advantage of this. There's 5 sectors that will take advantage of the sector: manufacturing, agriculture in the first 10 years. But I believe that if we can think carefully as youth and as young people, the ICT aspect, we can basically create industries that can get the smart technologies. We'll look at applications and so forth, smart agriculture, and so forth. We should not look at this agreement as just, otherwise this agreement will become like a book that'll be put on the shelf and we don't see anything happening later in the future. So the main aspect is, how do we go forward as Zimbabwe, Zambia? We're rich young people with great ideas. We should not look at this agreement only as a concept of whereby it's basically there, written, and it's just like a document and it just goes on a shelf. We need to basically look further and say, what ideas can we create that gives us an understanding of this agreement? So basically, that's my idea. So the first thing I believe we need to look at is the first industries that firstly will benefit from this agreement is the manufacturing industry. Remember that there's 2 tiers of this agreement: the underdeveloped countries and there's 2 tiers. The first tier indicates in the agreement under section 3, indicates for SMEs that the first thing is, if you're selling goods that are in your country, that is seen as a good that is private or powerful to your industry, then it can't be sold over the industry across the border over a 10-year period. So that is where I have a problem with the agreement. So we need to look at the concepts, right? But here's the good news. If you're able to create a loophole or see a shortcut into an industry where, for instance, agriculture. So let us say that you are selling groundnuts. I'm just giving you a simple example. And let us say that you're in Zambia and you want to sell groundnuts over the border. The agreement indicates that you're supposed to be able to sell it over the border with no customs, with no tax. Now, what happens if in that domestic market that you're entering into basically has domestic market, poor people in the village trying to sell groundnuts, but now you have a market? That means one country has more power over another country. Because I can bring in my groundnuts, because I'm selling, my country basically makes it easier for me to grow my groundnuts. So I bring my groundnuts over, so which means I destroy your market. So there are those aspects that we need to look at as well, because we can't destroy another domestic market. So we need to look at those aspects. Now, the West International Trade Center, the World Bank, tried to do it. Remember, Kapasa tried to create an industry where they had like Kapasa. Remember, Kapasa tried to create a section for SADC. We had, we basically had the AU who tried to organize the same concept of even the free passport, free movement for people, for Africans without a passport, African passport to travel, which never happened. You see? So there's a lot of like worry, because if we can do this properly as Africans, we become the strongest trading market in the world. So we need to like understand the concepts and the depths of, because remember, in every domestic market, we have political aspects that are also involved. There's business, there's conglomerates that are kind of jealous of this AfTA. So the concept is good. I'm very happy with the concept. The concept is very great. But what I believe as young SMEs, what you need to do is think about how you can take advantage of certain aspects that you can do now. Because if you wait for the whole process to basically work out, then we're basically looking at a concept that will take a lot of years to basically pile out. So I believe as Africans, the first thing we should do is think about, okay, which aspects can I take advantage of right now, and which sections in this agreement can I take advantage of? I'll put it back to Munya.
Yeah, that's quite intriguing, because we were actually talking about that with Farai, the idea of, if a big player then comes into the market, what does that mean to me with the market that I was already enjoying within my own borders? And now you mentioned that this can be only agreement that's there in theory and not in practice.
Yeah.
What can we do as hubs or associations or SMEs in order to somewhat benefit from the good parts of this agreement?
So basically, here are the good parts. I wish I had my PowerPoint. Now, the first part's where we can take advantage of this agreement. Now, for Zimbabwe and Zambia, SADC region, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Botswana, basically, now here are the good parts. Now, basically, the agreement officially was activated on the 1st of June, 1st January, actually, as you know, Munya, 2021. That's basically when it was activated. Now, what you need to do as SMEs, if you're in any business, let's say you're in agriculture, and you basically approach, let's say you have a smart app, you have an idea for a smart app in agriculture. Maybe you want to like basically look at the smart prices that are changing within maize meal. And you basically want to take advantage of like, how can I trade within like the South Africa, Botswana, and so forth. You need to basically approach the ministry. Now, the ministry has to listen to you because they have signed the agreement. They can't say no to you. And there's the part where they can't say no to you because they have signed the agreement. Now, here's the good part. Basically, every country will now have basically what is called an AfCFTA office. So Zimbabwe will have an AfCFTA office. Zambia will have one. Malawi will have one. Botswana will have one, an AfCFTA office. But you first will need to go to the industry in which you're involved in. So let's say I'm in agriculture. I'll have to go in my country to the Ministry of Agriculture. So you basically approach firstly your ministry and say, I would like to trade right now with this countries. Now remember, in the first phase of phase 1, you will not get like tax-free trading over a border. Yeah, they'll only give you like a tax-free portion. The problem is this: knowledge is power. So you need to understand certain portions. The first 10 years, now it begins with 2 parts. After agreement has been separated into 2 parts. So you have the countries that are more developed and the countries that are underdeveloped. So remember, the whole concept is supposed to happen over a period of 30 years if you read the agreement very deeply. I wish I had my PowerPoint, but with those data problems that we have in Africa, sadly, I was unable to put my data on.
All right, that makes sense. So where the person goes to the ministry, seeks the right information, and based on that information, they can use the knowledge to then leverage on the trade that they want to do. I wonder how open their doors they are.
Yeah.
That's a good one. It makes sense. So if you know, well, I would assume you know the industry that you work in or that, that you're in. Go to their offices, find out how you can leverage on the products or services that you're offering, and then the ministry will give you the right people to talk to in order to trade. Because this agreement is actually it's functional but not fully functional. Is that correct, Doc?
I agree with you. You're actually right. When you're actually right. It's not functional, and actually that is where the part where now this is the part where as SMEs we can actually take advantage of a certain part. The agreement came into effect in January of this year for all the countries that signed. That includes Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe signed, and Zambia signed. Now, here's the advantage as SMEs. When we approach, let's say you've got a smart app and you're in agriculture. You can actually go to the ministry and say, like, listen, so now I would like to take advantage of this AfCFTA agreement. They will have to listen to you because they signed the agreement. But here's the problem. They will say to you, wait for the office to be opened. Because remember, AfCFTA is supposed to open offices in every country that signed the agreement. So here's what I believe that SMEs we need to do. It's not to wait for that to happen. We basically need to make sure our company, if we have small business, create an idea, create like a basic concept and so forth that will make you enter. Imagine like, I'll give you an example. Imagine that I'm an IT specialist. It means that basically I won't benefit from the first 10 years of the first phase of this agreement because obviously I'm not in agriculture. But the majority of youth are basically IT. They're specialists. The majority of youths know how to use like platforms, Facebook, you know what I mean? Instagram. You know, informal sector, we believed in the old days, informal sector was a woman selling groundnuts at the corner of a street in the village when you're passing, whether you're in Bulawayo driving, a woman, an old lady selling her groundnuts. When you're in Zambia, a woman going to Chipata. If you're going to Malawi, you know, an old man selling, selling his decorations, African decorations on the street. That was known as the informal sector. But now the informal sector of the youth now have become clever. They can use a cell phone and basically now sell like clothes, sell like basically. So now basically as the youth, we become intelligent. Youth who have never gone to school know how to use a cell phone and use a platform such as Facebook or Instagram and basically use the concept to basically sell items. So after this new agreement has taken that into consideration, that informal sector is not just what we thought as Africans was informal sector. This is the new generation. It's the new Africa, where you find a mama selling like chitenges, as we call it in Zambia, you know?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like over a phone, or a woman in Malawi says, I can bake a cake. And you watch, oh wow, that's nice. And basically you look on Facebook, you know? So basically that's informal sector, because informal sector means there's no tax being taxed on this person. That's informal sector. It means the government can't get money, can't tax you. So that's informal. Yeah. You see? So after the agreement basically is trying to also say, let us tap into this, because the majority of Africa, we are informal. We're basically informal. That's the majority of us as Africans. So basically, how do we now tap into the business aspect? Let's be honest. Look at Facebook. Zuckerberg, when he started Facebook, was he in the formal sector or informal sector? Informal. That was just young guys basically starting a business in a university. That's informal sector.
Yeah.
That's informal.
I actually just found some statistics. They say 60% of the MSME operate in the informal sector, like you just mentioned. 60% of Africa, by the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're right. You're right there.
Those numbers are quite huge.
Huge,
I see our time is running out. Maybe
dear.
we can get some closing remarks from Dr. Kapasa and also from Mr. Farai.
Right.
Dr. Kapasa, perhaps you can start since you're already on a thought.
Right. Awesome. Awesome. So basically, the main aspects I would say to like, as young SMEs, the most important aspect we need to look at is, if we look at the AfCFTA agreement, kindly look at Section 3. But we shouldn't only look at the concept of Section 3. The concept is this: if you have a business idea, and let's say you feel as though you can't enter, let's say you're not agriculture, there's 5 main businesses that will benefit from this, 5 sectors that will benefit from this: manufacturing, agriculture, basically what they call intellectual property or money transfers, and what you call like as well as what you call like internal aspects, that's internal money transfers. So the ICT market, so basically IT becomes, but agriculture and so forth become a big aspect. So what I would say to any person who's basically listening to this right now is, imagine if I said, how do I get into agriculture? Because my ideas are making apps. Imagine you make an app for a smart app for basically seeing the weather for somebody who's somebody who grows maize. You can basically tap into that. That is the idea. So you basically tap into that. We are Africans, let's work together. Let's look at aspects of basically how we tap into this and make it happen. Because if we just sit and it'll just be an agreement that'll sit on a book, like all the agreements that have happened many years, you know.
Yeah,
I'm sure you know what I mean.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Kapasa. Mr. Farai, do you have any closing remarks?
What I would say is, I think AfCFTA presents very exciting opportunities. It's unfortunate we're coming out of a situation where we've operated as closed economies or as a closed economy for so long. But like I said, when we were talking in the beginning, this is the right direction for Africa. It is, there's no better way of doing things outside of kind of making this concept work. And like Dr. Kapasa highlighted, it's going to take time, but let's use that time to make ourselves ready to start to, we need to start. For me, the biggest or most important thing is to change our mindsets. We mustn't continue with this thing about, oh, I'm Zimbabwean and my audience is Zimbabweans. And there's huge opportunities there. Once this thing fully unveils, it's going to be tremendous, and that's going to happen in our lifetimes. So, we need to embrace it. We need to plan for it. Like I said before, we need to run with it. We need to own it, because it's not for the heads of state. It's not for governments, but it's for you and me. So I think that's how I would close off.
Definitely. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And for those that made time to watch this, thank you very much. You could have been anywhere else, but you chose to be with us. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your Easter. Please drive safe. And we'll talk soon, hopefully through another webinar. Good night for now.
Yeah. All right. Cheers.
Thanks. Cheers.
All right. Cheers.